Next, I'm pleased to introduce Selina Allu, who will talk about an inclusive method for developing patient-oriented research tools. Selina Allu is a knowledge translation broker and implementation support practitioner with a master's degree in human health geography. She is currently responsible for supporting knowledge mobilization for Can-SOLVE CKD Network's kidney research projects, and she strives to see research findings applied in the real world. Over to you, Selina.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm just going to start sharing my screen here. Okay. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So thank you again for the kind introduction, and it's always great to be here and support this group. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed all the sessions today. In fact, a large part of my presentation is really going to build on some of the conversations that have already happened earlier. So I'd like to start off by letting you know that, like Sophia, I'm calling from the territories of the people of Treaty 7, and Calgary is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, and it's a real honor to be here. I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about who we are and why we created patient-oriented research tools over the last 5 years, and a little bit about the method that we use, like what made our method so novel and inclusive, because it did reflect the needs and the perspectives of our patient partners who live with kidney disease. So I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about who we are. So Can-SOLVE CKD is one of 5 chronic disease networks funded by CIHR. We've been around since 2016, and we are a pan-Canadian research network involving patients, researchers, healthcare professionals, policymakers, academic health centers, health charities, as well as many other organizations. All 27 projects stem from research priorities that were identified by our patient partners. And we're also Canada's largest ever kidney research initiative. So quick refresher, and again, everyone in this audience probably familiar with the concept of patient-oriented research. But basically what POR is, it's about engaging patients, caregivers, and families as partners in the research process. And what that means is that it's a way of doing research that transforms the role of the patient from a passive receptor of services to a proactive partner who helps shape health research and health delivery. Our story begins in 2016 when we received funding from CIHR to support 18 kidney projects. So being a patient-oriented network, we knew that we had to embrace new ways of working and doing research with our patient partners. Many of us, however, did not know how to do patient-oriented research back then, and there weren't a lot of resources also available. So this was a pretty new concept for us. So one of the first things we did is we participated in CIHR foundational training, and we did this in person in 2 locations, one in Calgary and one in Toronto. That year, we also surveyed everyone who took this foundational training. And while the feedback we received was positive, our researchers and patient partners told us that the training lacked specific resources of how to do meaningful patient engagement in research. And that's where these 5 modules were created. And we also created a committee to develop these modules. So very quickly, The survey revealed sort of 5 areas where our network needed more support. One was around practical resources for how to do patient engagement, right? So specifically, how do you improve communication and collaboration? How do you level the playing field between researchers and non-researchers? How do you tell impactful stories in the context of patient-centered care? We also knew we needed a common understanding of the general research concepts. How do we meaningfully and respectfully engage with our Indigenous communities? And also, how do we do knowledge translation? So this is how the committee was born. As you can see, we're a pretty diverse group. Our members, we started off as a small committee and we grew over the span of like 5 years. And we're a committed group of individuals who most of us have generously volunteered our time and our knowledge and expertise because we feel very strongly about creating some of these modules. I think the diversity of our group promoted unique perspectives when we started to create these tools, and it also allowed us to be more inclusive and changed the way we did things. Over the span of 4 years, actually, we created 5 learning branches or modules that helped fill the gaps that we saw from the survey. Our patient partners guided us to use the tree metaphor to remind us that our modules will continue to evolve and grow, and that our process must be rooted in our core values of respect, relevance, reciprocity, responsibility, and reflection. So the first module we created is a patient engagement toolkit. It provides a suite of practical tools to support new ways for researchers and patients to work together. And it includes things like tips for collaboration, roles for patients, a glossary of terms, as well as some practical tools to support the internal functioning of teams. As many of you have, I think we've heard this earlier today, a lot of our patient partners come with their own unique skills and expertise and lived experience. So the skills and contribution chart, which is one resource under this toolkit, was something that our patient partners felt really strongly about and wanted us to include. So it's a great tool to use if you want to help identify or match the skills your patient partners bring to the table and how you can utilize those skills in supporting your research process. Our second module is called Kidney Pro. It's an online training module that was co-created with our patient partners to help understand the foundational aspects of how to do research in Canada, of course, with a focus on kidney research. If you want a better understanding of the different roles for patients in kidney research or how to engage patients in a research process, then this is an excellent place to start. Storytelling for Impact is our third module. And this is where patient partners gain the skills and the confidence on how to tell and organize their stories by writing and focusing on moments of care around which they build their stories. This module has changed in form and delivery since it was first piloted in 2018. So we started off offering it as an intensive 8-hour virtual course supported by 2 story coaches. And then we turned it into a handbook just to keep up with demand. And then finally, we took that handbook and we converted it into an online interactive module for a better, more interactive user experience. So this is an example of how our committee pivoted to respond to the changing needs from our patient partners because they wanted something in a different format and a different type of a delivery method. Our fourth module is a training platform called the Wabishki Bijikoskanj Learning Pathway. Carol and Tate spoke about this earlier, but essentially we know that in Canada, Indigenous people experience racism within the health sector. And this has negatively impacted both the quality of care that Indigenous people receive, as well as how research related to Indigenous populations is conducted. So what this committee did is we convened with our Indigenous patient-led council and in partnership with other organizations, created this learning pathway that aims to build cultural competency within the healthcare sector. The pathway comprises of a suite of existing resources, such as SANIAS and OCAP and the Kairos blanket exercise, in addition to original components that were developed by Can-SOLVE. The learning pathway has been designed for researchers, for healthcare providers, for patient partners, and for administrators. And learners can complete one or more components of the pathway depending on their learning needs and their ability. The last module focuses on knowledge translation, and shout out to both Manuel and Mary, who were key patient partners who provided feedback and review and helped create this module, which is called How to Distill Key Messages from an Academic Publication and Communicate Using Plain Language. So this module is an interactive online module where a learner starts to learn some key skills on how to read an academic publication, how to identify who needs to know what in that publication, and how to build skills on how to effectively communicate that message. So it is an excellent skill building module for anyone who wants to learn how to disseminate research findings from a paper. If you want to know more about our process and about how the 5 learning branches were developed, I encourage you to read our 2022 paper. It's freely accessible. And now for the remainder of the presentation, I'm going to share some key learnings about our inclusive approach to how we created these modules. Creating a safe space for open communication is the first step towards meaningful collaboration. Members of our training and mentorship committee came from all across the country with different skills, different experience, and different motivation. So guided by our Indigenous members, one approach that the committee used for creating safe spaces for inclusiveness and mutual respect was through the use of talking circles. This approach allowed all voices around the table to be equally heard and valued. What we saw was that once participants got to know each other and find areas of commonality, the barriers started to fall and collaboration was greatly enhanced. We could also accomplish only so much doing work virtually. So what we did is we set aside 2 days where the Training and Mentorship Committee would meet in person every January in Montreal. And we did this from 2017 to 2020. Looking back now, most of our key decisions were made collaboratively at these meetings. We also created working groups and we leveraged subject matter experts as needed. Ultimately, these in-person meetings ensured that we had focused time to brainstorm ideas and to do real hands-on work. It also enhanced group cohesiveness, serving as time to share knowledge, to bond, to learn, and to work towards a common goal. In the early days, we had dedicated volunteers doing the actual work. This worked in the beginning because we had 1 or 2 highly motivated individuals. But as our work increased, the time investment required to create these modules became too demanding for volunteers. I think the best thing that we did was to invest in a paid coordinator to oversee day-to-day activities, to organize meetings, to document our process, and more importantly, to keep us on track. Like, remember, we're trying to create 5 different modules here. We also knew that it was going to take more time than originally expected to create these tools. So we learned to be flexible and to allow for time to create, to reflect, to test, and then to launch the modules in an iterative way. We revisited timelines regularly, and we agreed on expectations from the onset to make sure that everybody was comfortable with this flexible approach. But it was also important that we stay focused because we had to create and deliver something. And that's where the paid coordinator was so important to the success of the process. We also utilized a Can-SOLVE community of practice to offer educational webinars while these modules were being developed, just because we knew that there'd be a lag time and people still need the information to be able to do patient-oriented research. And I think this also speaks to what Mary spoke of earlier this morning about the importance of taking time and being respectful of the process. And we actually learned this from our patient partners. We are always mindful of patient needs and preferences, right? And through consultation with our patient partners, we co-designed our meetings, tasks that we needed to complete, and we really took into account important considerations like timing of meetings, the duration of the meetings, supports that were needed by the different working groups. I think this is really, really important when you're working with a group over a long period of time, and especially with people who are living with kidney disease. As we rolled out these modules to our network, we started to notice a culture shift. For example, the implementation of the Wabishki-Bijikoskanj learning pathway resulted in greater inclusion and adoption of culturally safe practices within our network. So territorial acknowledgement at the beginning of every meeting became commonplace. Sharing circles were used in many projects and initiatives. Knowledge keepers were invited to open and conclude many of our network meetings and workshops. Graduates of the storytelling module have told impactful stories at many conferences and events. And a lot of these stories have been featured in articles, in peer-reviewed journals, as well as in mass media. Additionally, our researchers are also sharing testimonials about how working with patient partners have changed not only the way they do research, but how they care for patients, which I think is really, really impactful. So in conclusion, I'd like to encourage all of you to take a look at our training modules. They're freely accessible from our Can-SOLVE website. So there's the link. You would click on one of the tabs at the top called resources, and then you'll be able to see the section for training modules. We'd love you to get back to us and tell us what you thought of the modules, how you use them, and if you have any suggestions for improvement. Again, remember, like a tree, we're going to evolve and grow, and we'd like to keep these resources as relevant as possible. We will continue to refine our modules and hopefully develop new ones. And I think the best way for you to stay in touch with us so that you know about these resources is to subscribe to our newsletter. Feel free to also get in touch with me by email if you have any questions or if you would like a copy of this presentation. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Selina. This is helpful to hear how Can-SOLVE creates meaningful, inclusive, flexible patient engagement with patient-oriented research. I love the use of talking circles and in-person meetings to remove perceived barriers and create connections.